Hello everybody, I'm Lane Mars, and in today's video we are going to be going over 3 completely random NHL players. I just picked 3 guys out of a hat, pretty much. The first 3 names that popped into my brain, we're going for them. We're going to look over their careers, see what they've accomplished. Ladies and gentlemen, starting it off right at the top, we have Andrew Desjardins. Pause, I'm retarded. His name is Andrew Desjardins. I knew that. I don't know why I decided to pronounce his name I don't know, but I'm sorry. If Andrew Desjardins watches this video, I'm even more sorry, because dude, that's awful. But yeah, thanks. He had a tough route to the NHL, and he says himself that he would have been a coal miner if it was not for his talent in hockey. He started in the 03-04 season with the Sioux Greyhounds in the OHL. In 55 games played, had 3 goals, 6 assists, 9 points, and 41 penalty minutes. In 04-05 in the OHL, he had 17 goals, 17 assists for 34 points. Originally supposed to be taken in the 2004 draft, he went undrafted, and in the 05-06 season with the Sioux Greyhounds of the OHL, had 12 goals, 16 assists, 28 points in 66 games. So unfortunately, that isn't a lot of progression, if you were to say. However, his penalty minutes go from 49 to 78. And in the 06-07 season, in 65 games played, scored 16 goals, 26 assists, 42 points, which is a little bit of that progression that you want to see. Also, his penalty minutes go up again, all the way up to 96. In the 07-08 season, he goes pro in the Central Hockey League, which is essentially like a Mexican hockey league, if you were to say so, a Southern Hockey League at that. And he plays for the Laredo Bucks. In 64 games played, has 22 goals, 37 assists for 59 points, and 112 penalty minutes. On top of that, in 11 games played in the playoffs, has 2 goals, 4 assists, 6 points. In 08-09, he is signed a AHL deal with the Worcester Sharks, the San Jose Sharks AHL affiliate team. In 74 games played, has 8 goals, 14 assists, 22 points. However, it gets better the next season. In 09-10 with 80 games played, 19 goals, 27 assists, 46 points, and he's a perfect middle six forward in the AHL. Also a bit of a tough guy with 126 penalty minutes. Huge. Now, leading up to the 2010-2011 season, the San Jose Sharks sign Andrew Desjardins to a professional NHL entry-level contract, paying him $535,000 a year. He makes his NHL debut against the Vancouver Canucks in 2010. Only plays 17 games in the NHL for the 2010-11 season. 17 games, 1 goal, 2 assists, 3 points. In the AHL that year, in 58 games played, 12 goals, 17 assists, 29 points. His first full season in the NHL in 2011-2012, 76 games played, 4 goals, 13 assists, 17 points. Andrew Desjardins was starting to make his way into the NHL as a really good bottom sixer. Also 47 penalty minutes. Definitely can't overlook him. In 2012-13, 42 games played, 2 goals, 1 assist, 3 points. In 13-14, he plays a full 81 games, 3 goals, 14 assists, 17 points. In the 14-15 season with the San Jose Sharks, he only plays 56 games for San Jose. However, 5 goals, 3 assists, 8 points before he's traded to the Chicago Blackhawks and plays 13 games with them. 0 goals, 2 assists, 7 penalty minutes. However, 21 playoff games, 1 goal, 3 assists, 4 points, and a Stanley Cup, which is the most important thing. Andrew Desjardins wins that Stanley Cup, and he's a huge part of that bottom six in Chicago, that gritty, grindy fourth line that gets it done. Again, that was a huge championship for Andrew Desjardins. It's the only Stanley Cup he wins during his career. However, in the 15-16 season with the Chicago Blackhawks, 77 games played, 8 goals, 5 assists, 13 points. A year later, in 16-17, in 46 games played, no goals, 1 assist, and that kind of is the end of his NHL career. Now, he eventually signs a contract in the Deutsche Eishockey League, which is a German hockey league which has been around since 1994-95, and the team that he signs a contract with, the Mannheim Eagles, has the record for the most championships in the league's history. They have a grand total of 7 championships starting in 96-97. They go on a quick little three-peat. They lose it in the year 2000, get it back in the year 2001. Take a couple years off. In year 2007, they win it again. In the year 2015, they win it again and again in 2019 as well. On top of that, lots of runner-up chances from the Mannheim Eagles, losing in the finals for that championship game. Andrew Desjardins does win a championship with the Mannheim Eagles. However, before we get there, his first 31 games in 17-18 in the Deutsche Eishockey League, 31 games, 13 goals, 13 assists, 26 points. In 18-19, 51 games, 15 goals, 28 assists, 43 points, and a championship which includes 13 playoff games, 9 goals, 5 assists, 14 points. So he was absolutely a star player for the Mannheim Eagles during this time, and I think after winning a Stanley Cup in the NHL, he got his money. Now he's just playing hockey for fun. And I really do respect that. In 1920, 50 games played, 18 goals, 26 assists, 44 points. Now in 2020-2021, we only see 8 games and 2 assists. Now I have to imagine this has something to do with COVID. However, I never went ahead, did the research myself. In 21-22, he plays 45 games in the German league, 8 goals, 14 assists, 22 points. Only 3 games in the playoffs, and then the year after that, he ends up going to the Austrian league. For the 22-23 season, he ends up joining the Austrian league, which has had as many as 14 teams in the 21-22 season. However, now it's down to the number 13, and it started in the year 79-80 with only 2 teams in the league. In 47 games played in 22-23, 12 goals, 16 assists, 28 points. And in 23-24, in 47 games played, 13 goals, 24 assists, 37 points. And no championships in the Austrian league for our boy Andrew Desjardins. However, he had a great NHL career, long career, and here's a little clip of him talking about his time growing up and what his life could have looked like if he didn't have hockey.
Also went undrafted. Of the 5 undrafted players on the Sharks roster, his story might be the most intriguing. Desjardins' route to the NHL once took a stop in a CHL town on the Texas-Mexico border. Desjardins says if it wasn't for hockey, he might be working in the mines.
Doing what his dad did. I'd probably like where I'm from. It's a mining community and stuff. So I would probably be in the mines as a millwright or some sort of trades electrician or some in that area. So I think that's probably what I would be doing.
So while we fans may feel a disconnect at times, it is important to remember most of the athletes are just like you and me, and a lot of them could have just as easily ended up working a 9-to-5 job. Reporting for the Gator Sports Network, I'm Andy Bench.
Really inspiring story of an undrafted player making it all the way to the NHL and winning a Stanley Cup. He really lived the dream that we all aspire to. And shout out Andrew Desjardins, man. Just one of those names that I haven't really thought about in a while, and I'm like, yeah, that motherfucker was that dude was bad as hell. So shout out Andrew Desjardins. I don't know how to pronounce it. Desjardins, whatever. Next dude, Jamie Langenbrunner. Let's get it. All right, starting off his first full season in the NHL with the 96-97 Dallas Stars in 76 games played. 13 goals, 26 assists, 39 points. 39 points at 21 years of age is pretty damn good. And now he plays 5 games in the playoffs, has 1 goal, 1 assist, 2 points. Now, in his sophomore season, there is no sophomore slump. In fact, he only gets better in 97-98. 23 goals, 29 assists, 52 points. On top of that, helps Dallas Stars go on a nice little playoff run to the conference finals. 16 games, 1 goal, 4 assists. 98-99 Dallas Stars. Of course, this is the championship team, as we all know, the team that eventually hoists Lloyd Stanley. However, before we get there, Jamie Langenburner plays a huge part. 12 goals, 33 assists, 45 points. On top of that, in 23 games, has 10 goals, 17 assists. Really clutch goal scoring, top 6 forward. I mean, he is a winner. You can definitely tell in the way he plays. Hard checking, you can just see it. 99-2000 Dallas Stars. I believe this team goes all the way back to the Stanley Cup final. However, they don't win it. 18 goals, 21 assists, 39 points, and only 65 games played. On top of that, 68 penalty minutes. So, his penalty minutes per game is the highest in his career. Really showing off that tough guy persona, that tough guy side. You know how it is, I suppose. In 15 games played in the playoffs that year, only 1 goal, 7 assists, 8 points. And I really do think Jamie Langenburner not playing in all the playoff games that year, and really only having 1 goal plays a huge part in them not repeating as Stanley Cup champions. The 2000-2001 Dallas Stars, in 53 games played, have 12 goals, 18 assists, 30 points. 10 games in the playoffs, 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points. So again, not the same effective playoff scorer as he was in their championship season. 2001-2002 for the Dallas Stars in 68 games played, 10 goals, 60 assists, 26 points before he's traded at the deadline and goes to the New Jersey Devils, where he plays 14 games, has 3 goals, 3 assists, 6 points. On top of that, goes on a nice little playoff run where they lose in the first round. It's not a nice little playoff run. I lied, dude. And he had 1 assist, 5 games played. However, he definitely makes it up the next year in 2002-2003. 78 games played, 22 goals, 33 assists, 55 points. This is prime Jamie Langenburner back in action. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, back in the playoffs. Almost the same stat line as when they won the Stanley Cup with Dallas. 11 goals, 7 assists, 18 points. He scored 1 more goal in 1 more game. 24 games played compared to the 23 games played he played beforehand. And he wins a Stanley Cup with New Jersey. He's a 2-time Stanley Cup champion at this point in his career. Now, in 03-04, he plays 53 games, 10 goals, 16 assists, 26 points. And 5 games played, 2 assists, 2 points in the playoffs in the first round loss to, Calgary? I'm just trying to think. No. Why the fuck would it be Calgary? They're in the West. I'm going to look it up. 2004 playoff tree. Alright, let's see. NHL, bro. Giving me baseball playoff trees like I want to see that shit. They lost in the first round to Philly? Was Eric Lindros on that team? Okay, you guys are learning. You guys are going on a journey with me here. 03-04 Philadelphia Flyers. Hockey reference. So who's on this team, bro? Because they went pretty deep. Mark Recchi, John LeClaire, Patrick Sharp, dude. Shout out Patrick Sharp. I don't know. I guess they were just a good team. Keith Primo. I don't know. Okay, so the New Jersey Devils choked in the playoffs to the Philadelphia Flyers. It was terrible. And moving on, they have a lockout in 04-05 where New Jersey very well might have had another chance at winning a Stanley Cup. They're a very good team. However, he goes over to the Deutsch League, the one that I was talking about with Andrew Desjardins. Yes, baby, it's all coming back. 11 games, 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points, and then I think he was just like, nah, I'm done in Germany. However, he does play for the playoffs, so I lied again. 11 games played, 1 goal, 6 assists, 7 points for the Ingolstadt ERC. Shout out, dude. Shout out. 05-06, I'm sure he's happy to be 05-06, I'm sure he's happy to be back in the NHL on home soil, back in America. Once again, he's from Minnesota, so it makes sense. He's happy to be back in the United States. New Jersey Devils, 80 games, back in his prime form. But scoring was up that season coming out of the lockout. Again, Joe Thornton put up 120 points, and that was pretty impressive. I think the only person doing that before was Yager, so. And the Bruins traded him, dude. What was that about? In 06-07 for the New Jersey Devil, 23 goals, 37 assists, 60 points, and in 11 games in the playoffs, 2 goals, 6 assists, 8 points. So the New Jersey Devils are still trying to be a competitive team at this point. They have guys like Patrick Elias, Jamie Langenbrunner, Marty Brodeur still in net. However, they've lost, I don't know. Yeah, at this point, I think they've lost Scott Niedermayer. He has gone to Anaheim. He's going to win a cup in Anaheim this year that I just talked about. He wins the Stanley Cup in Anaheim this season. So, Jamie Langenbrunner and the New Jersey Devils, it's looking like the window might be closing, but hey, they're going to keep pushing on. In 2007, 2008, Jamie Langenbrunner, 13 goals, 28 assists, 41 points. At 32 years of age, in 2007, 2008, 64 games played, 13 goals, 28 assists, 41 points. 5 games in the playoffs, 4 assists, no goals. Yeah, they lose in the first round. That's a tough one. 2008, 2009, 81 games played. He's back to himself. 29 goals, 40 assists, 69 points. This is a career high in both goals and assists. Not assists. He would score more assists this season than this. However, this is a career high for goals, and at the time it's a career high for assists, and he has 69 points, which is a career high for points. So, that's pretty huge. And speaking of that career high for assists, in 2009, 2010, 81 games played, 19 goals, 42 assists, 61 points. 2010, 2011, 31 games played, 4 goals, 10 assists, 14 points. Then he's traded to the Dallas Stars, where he plays 39 games, 5 goals, 13 assists, 18 points, for a combined total of 32 points. Then in 2011-2012, he plays for the St. Louis Blues, and unfortunately misses out on the New Jersey Devils' last hurrah all the way to the Stanley Cup Final, where they would lose to the Los Angeles Kings, who were also on quite the Cinderella run. I've talked about that on previous videos, just briefly. I might do a video on that, maybe. And right before he retires from the NHL as a player in 2012-2013, 4 games played, only 1 assist, and then he calls it quits. He hangs it up. However, he has appeared on some podcasts, and he does have some really great stories. His story about when he first made his entrance into the NHL is a great example here. I'll play it for you. Shout out to...
My billet parents had a tough time tracking me down to find out where I was, because Bob Gainey was trying to get a hold of me, and they finally did at my buddy's house. And I remember being in a scramble because I had to get to the Toronto airport to fly to St. Louis, and we had dyed our hair and stuff, so I had to go find a barber to cut out all my streaks in my hair, and couldn't quite get it all out. But
Jamie Langenbrunner passed his retirement is in his 10th season in the Bruins organization and in his 3rd year as assistant general manager in player personnel, and after 4 years as the director of player development and player personal advisor. So a bunch of fancy names. It is what it is. He got a fucking job. So that's cool. Alright, next up we're going into Pat Hickey. He's an old dude, born in 1953. He's like 71 years old now. Yeah. I'm gonna eat some cereal first. So I got Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Let me know what y'all's favorite cereal is. Alright, and moving on to our third random NHL player. This is an old guy. We got a boomer here. Pat Hickey. Born May 15, 1953 in Brantford, Ontario. Pat Hickey's first season of note was with the Ontario Hockey Association, the OHA, in the season 1970-71 for the Hamilton Red Wings. In 55 games played, had 15 goals, 17 assists for 32 points. And in the next year, 71-72, in the OHA, 58 games played, 21 goals, 39 assists, 60 points. So he almost doubles his point total in only 3 more games played. So yeah, that's the progression we want to. In 72-73, his draft year in the OHA for the Hamilton Red Wings, once again, in 61 games played, has 32 goals, 47 assists for 79 points. And this is good enough to get him drafted 30th overall in the 1973 NHL draft, and good enough to get him drafted 18th overall in the 1973 WHA amateur draft. He spends his first 2 seasons eligible for professional hockey, playing for the Toronto Toros of the WHA. In 78 games played, has 26 goals, 29 assists for 55 points in the 73-74 season. However, moving on to 74-75, in 74 games played, has 35 goals, 34 assists for 69 points. So once again, that continued improvement is what you want to see, and the New York Rangers like what they saw enough to call him up for the 75-76 season, where he scores where he plays 70 games, scores 14 goals, 22 assists for 36 points, is a nice little middle 6 forward for them in a time where the Rangers really aren't that good. Like, they got Phil Esposito, I think, at this point, and I mean, they have won a Stanley Cup since 1940. However, in 76-77, it looks like he might be one of those bright spots in the future. 23 goals, 17 assists, 40 points. He breaks out at the age of 24, 40 goals, 33 assists, 73 points in 80 games played. The New York Rangers have a young 24-year-old 40-goal scorer on their hands. And in the 78-79 season, his last full season with the New York Rangers at this point, 34 goals, 41 assists for 75 points. After only 7 games with the New York Rangers in the 79-80 season, 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points, he is traded to the Colorado Rockies for Barry Beck. That they get Barry Beck. Who? Barry Beck. Who at the time was a 20-year-old rising star for the Colorado Rockies, and really, he had a career-high 60 points in 75 games played in the 77-78 season, so it seems like the New York Rangers were after their man for the future once again. However, they gave up quite the haul in order to acquire Barry Beck, including Pat Hickey, who, I mean, that seems to be the biggest loss, because if you ask me, he is just as good as Barry Beck, maybe even better. I think he aged better, and he's 4 years older only, which doesn't make a huge difference, and I get that's what the Rangers were going for with Barry Beck. However, the Rangers give up Lucien Deblois, Pat Hickey, Mike McEwen, Dean Turner, and future considerations, which end up being Bob Crawford. Now, that's a total of 5 players for just 1 player, and when you consider the fact that Barry Beck and Pat Hickey really are similar players, it makes it tough. Hickey is traded to the Colorado Rockies for Barry Beck. Now, Pat Hickey is traded with a bunch of players for Barry Beck. Now, Barry Beck had a 60-point season with the Colorado Rockies and was looking like a up-and-coming offensive defenseman on the blue line. And, of course, this is the era of Bobby Orr just dominating the league, and everyone's wondering who the next offensive defenseman superstar is. And a 21-year-old Barry Beck, who had 60 points only 2 seasons ago, definitely seems like he could be the guy to thread the needle for the New York Rangers. However, if you ask me, they gave up far too much, considering Pat Hickey was a 40-goal scorer just hitting his stride at the NHL level. Lucien DeBlois, they trade Pat Hickey, Mike McEwen, and Dean Turner, along with future considerations Bob Crawford. And finishing the season off with the Colorado Rockies, no, he doesn't. And again, in only 24 games played with the Colorado Rockies, 7 goals, 9 assists, 16 points before he's traded. And what happens this time? Well, he's traded. Of course, this is what happens. What was his name? If I can just remember his fucking name. Harold Ballard, okay. So what? Yeah. After only 24 games with the Colorado Rockies, some stuff goes down in Toronto where Harold Ballard does not like Daryl Sittler, and basically Daryl Sittler has a no move clause on his contract, so they can't trade him. So instead, Harold Ballard, in order to upset Daryl Sittler, trades away his best friend Lanny McDonald, who is a Hall of Fame player, 60 goal scorer, and he's traded to the Colorado Rockies for Pat Hickey and Will Piment, and the Rockies acquire Lanny McDonald and Joel Quenneville. Now, obviously, no doubt about it, the Rockies win this trade. However, Toronto, something that is often overlooked in this trade is the fact that Pat Hickey is a pretty solid player and a proven 40-goal scorer at this point. And although trading out Lanny McDonald is heartbreaking because of his chemistry with Daryl Sittler and the fact that obviously Lanny McDonald is a better player than Pat Hickey, I don't think this trade is as terrible looking back. I mean, really, it has a lot of similarities with like the Luka Doncic Anthony Davis trade that just happened in the NBA a couple months ago, however long ago that was, in a sense where a much better player gets traded for another guy who's still quite good, but just not at that next level. And I think, that's something. And he finishes the season off with the Toronto Maple Leafs in 45 games, 22 goals, 16 assists, 38 points. So once again, like a 40-goal pace, 38 points in 45 games is not bad in the slightest. And I think that this is something that is not talked about when we bring up the Lanny McDonald trade, because it still does get brought up almost 50 years later, it still gets brought up. A full 45 years later, we talk about it sometimes because, it was pretty crazy that Harold Ballard dude really did not like this Daryl Sittler guy. I mean, really, he doesn't spend that long in Toronto, so that might be part of the reason why this trade is looked down on, because in 80-81, in 72 games played, his final full season with the Toronto Maple Leafs, 16 goals, 33 assists, 49 points. So again, that is not quite a 40-goal pace, that's more like a 20-goal pace, and I mean, really, it is what it is, but I think fans expected a little bit more from him. And in 81-82, after only one game with the Toronto Maple Leafs, no goals, no assists, he gets traded to the New York Rangers for a 5th-round pick. And I think this is where Leafs fans really had a problem with the Lanny McDonald trade, because only 2 years after acquiring Pat Hickey, who is supposed to be the main piece you get back, with Lanny McDonald, you throw him away for a 5th-round pick, 99th overall. And you realize that they traded Lanny McDonald away for nothing, and that trade should be criticized overall. As the story unfolds, it turns out it was a bad idea to trade the Hall of Famer, 60-goal scoring mustache legend. I mean, who would have thought? And after 53 games back with the New York Rangers, 15 goals, 14 assists, 29 points. So, like, not bad. Top 6. He's a top 6 player. Like, I don't know. There's nothing else to be said there. He ends up with the Quebec Nordiques for a 7-game stint where he gets 1 assist, dude. That's the whole reason I wore that jersey. Okay, moving on. He plays in the Central Hockey League, which, of course, we talked about with Andrew Desjardins. It's like a Mexican, Southern Hockey League. And in 36 games played with the Salt Lake Golden Eagles. Yo, shout out Utah. They finally got an NHL team. But at this point, they were the Salt Lake Golden Eagles. 36 games played, 13 goals, 12 assists, 25 points. And then he ends up with the St. Louis Blues as the Quebec Nordiques trade him to the St. Louis Blues in 1982 for Rick Lapointe. And in 83-84, his first full season with the St. Louis Blues, 9 goals, 11 assists, 20 points. At this point, he's a third liner at best. And I mean, really, it sucks that he never wins a Stanley Cup. However, there is one more season to talk about before we get into that. 57 games played, 10 goals, 13 assists, 23 points, and there's no Stanley Cup for him. There's no WHA championship. There's an Avco Cup. That's what it was called. But he does have a decent career outside of playing hockey at the NHL level. He became the general manager for the New Haven Nighthawks, which were the AHL affiliate of the Los Angeles Kings. He also was an investor in New York, and he was apparently a pretty successful investor, and I assume that's what he's still doing to this day. He is 71 years of age. His birthday, as I mentioned before, is in May, May 15th to be exact. He will be 72. Shout out Pat Hickey, underappreciated NHLer, and I mean, that's what this video is about, just like 3 guys who are underappreciated, and I think need to be talked about because they definitely were some players. Dude, who's talking about Pat Hickey now? No offense to Pat Hickey. Shout out, dude. You had a great career, but you know what I'm saying? It's fun to look at these things. So, yeah.